You have heard the plans. It is now your turn. But before we begin with our question and answer segment, we're going to change something on the platform. But I'll use the moment to recognize a few familiar faces. Mr. Trevor Heaven, businessman of Manchester. Mr. Kirk Ogilvie, I see you. I can't miss you. Is also here. I see Mr. Bowes. Mr. Bowes is also here, and other distinguished members that are in the audience. But I also wanted to pause to signal how much the information has resonated and the demographic that it has impacted. I want the young professional arm of the People's National Party to stand. The Patriots, please stand. This group, give them a round of applause. The young professional arm, a lot of these members are current councillors and councillors to be, headed by Ms. Candice Hales, President of the Manchester chapter. I want now the People's National Party youth arm to stand. Our young people, give them a round of applause. They are here to hear the plans and the messages and to bring it back to their communities. Look at them. They're all here, young and proud and engaged in the process. Thank you. Now, it is your turn. It is your turn to participate. Now for our question, answers, and recommendation segment. This is, in fact, a response to the presentations outlined with our presenters, them being able to respond accordingly, ensuring that you are not only informed, but are aligned with a correct reflection of any information relevant to the next administration's plans for action. We ask that contributors state their names and where they're from for the record. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I ask please keep your questions and recommendations very short and to the point so we can get around the room. Thank you, and let's begin. Mr. Dexter Martin, who is center, will assist you with a microphone if you have any questions at this time for any of the members of the panelists.
Testing.
Microphone.
Testing.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sheree Lambert. I am from Mandeville. I'm a little bit nervous, so stay with me. I have my notes, but I'm going to put it down. All right. So I'm wearing purple today because of domestic violence. I heard the party leader mention that we need to revise morals and values in the society. Now, in 2022, domestic violence rose to over 54%. Now, I think in 2024, it was over 8,600. That's the number of domestic violence cases that's reported. So can you imagine those that are not reported? Because some people are ashamed to really admit it. Now, if you look in here, they're mostly females, and we're all cute. But 1 in 4, for every 4 women in here, there's a probability that 1 has been abused. No, and that is, if we not take it serious, we're doomed. And one very uncomfortable fact, I'm going to make everybody in here very uncomfortable right now, our children are the next set of abusers. So what are we going to be doing about that?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Yeah, it's a very difficult and sensitive topic, as you have said. I think you have to tackle these kind of cultural problems that we have from in a multifaceted, in a kind of holistic approach. On the side of the stick, so to speak, the laws of the country need to be fit for purpose in dealing with these issues. And I was on a committee of parliament, a joint select committee that reviewed the Domestic Violence Act, the Sexual Offences Act, the Child Care and Protection Act, and one other. And we submitted a report which said that there should be further review and examination of the issue of domestic violence in particular, because we were covering such a wide range of issues to do with sexual offenses and so on. We didn't have a chance to really focus on domestic violence. That committee must have been over 5 years ago. We're just now hearing about a committee which was appointed but has really been fairly dormant to look at the Domestic Violence Act. And it needs to be looked at thoroughly. It's not just about the penalties and so on, but it's also to do with how the realities of domestic situations, where often the victim is reluctant to pursue a case because they depend on the person who has victimized them for support for them and their children. And the question is, how do you address that, and what kind of support can you provide to that victim so that they can come out of that situation if they have to? And also, to what extent can the state take a stand on an issue even if the complainant is having second thoughts on it? I mean, we have a situation right now where there's a candidate for the Jamaica Labour Party, apparently, who was generally regarded as having committed a serious public offense of domestic violence with his common law wife at the time. It was caught on video. And that person, they said, had been expelled from the party, but now that person is back running for the party in the election that's about to take place, while all these parliamentarians are shedding tears for the other issues of domestic violence that are topical at the moment. So there's a real double standard there. We feel that there needs to be additional support in each parish. We want to establish a domestic violence support center in every parish of the country, so that women in particular, it's not only women, but mainly women who are the victims of this type of thing, have somewhere where they can go and get care and attention, and even counseling around their legal rights, and also around how to manage the relationship they're in if they need help with that. And then education is a critical part of it too. I think that we need to have appropriate guidance in schools that all of our students at the appropriate age are exposed to, that really teaches them that this is not an acceptable way of addressing conflicts in relationships, and that people must find other ways of dealing with these situations rather than resorting to hitting or hurting somebody who they're in a relationship with. And if we can get that change at the younger levels, at the, hopefully as they grow up, they will themselves put into practice what they would have learned, and even influence their parents as well with what they have learned. There were two bills that have been tabled in Parliament in the name of the former Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller at the beginning of 2016, I think it was, or the end of 2015, which sought to impose higher penalties, give the court a jurisdiction to give a serious uplift on a penalty where the victim of violence was a woman or a child. Nothing has been done about that. We lost the election before that legislation could be passed, and it has just laid dormant there. So I think it's an issue you have to tackle in many different ways. It's a cultural issue. You have to deal with it in that way as well, from the law enforcement side, from the cultural re-engineering side and from the support to victim side as well. And we're committed to trying to really move the needle forward in that by looking at it holistically and really putting some emphasis beside each angle on it that needs to be given care and attention for us to make change. But thank you for your question.
Thank you. Jones Oliphant, Councillor Mandeville Division. And also farmer. Yeah, also. My question is that we have to have an agricultural policy. When we look and see Monimus, Innswood, Bernard Lodge, these were areas that produced the highest sucrose content of sugarcane in Jamaica. And all of these lands has been hurriedly converted to housing. As a result of that, you find that the arable lands that we have in and around Jamaica are put into housing, while those lands that are marginal should be the lands that should be in housing. I would like to see that we even start with one of these factories and get back those lands in production. Whether it's Monimus, Innswood. Innswood had the highest rate of sucrose content, but unfortunately only a few acres leave now. But we need to get an industrial agricultural policy so that we can produce. The sugar industry, in full bloom, we have about 15 different sectors in the industry, which means that it's 15 different sectors being employed in just that one industry. And we need to look at these. We need to get back to the industrial policy and agricultural policy so that we can make use of the few acres of arable lands that we have left. And Mr. Agriculture, I want you to pursue this, sir, so that we can have better life for our people in these areas. When sugar is running in Monimus, we know that down Clarendon, everything is good. Innswood, the same. Bernard Lodge has been converted or want to be converted to a city. That's concrete. Our people need food to eat. We cannot eat concrete. And if we go on that way, what's going to happen is that we're going to still have to be importing food. So look at it, Minister.
I'm going to hand, I don't know if you want to say any response. One thing I would say, though, is that I was very encouraged when I met with a group of investors who were looking at investing in Monimus to revive it as a sugar-producing entity. These were a group of investors from Guyana, India, and North America who were forming a consortium to do that. I mean, as we've seen from the history of the sugar industry, it's been very challenging economically to grow sugar and produce sugar, rather, efficiently in Jamaica. 1 and 2 private entities have been able to do that. But, you know, if we can get people who really understand the industry to invest in it, then there are opportunities to revive aspects of it. But maybe some of the former sugar lands can be eventually put into other types of production as well. So, you know, it's something we have to look at in a very cold and analytical way. But I was very encouraged to find that there were these people who were, and in fact, I mean, they are trying to get the access to those lands so they can make their investment. Next question.
Yes, good night, everyone. Let me greet the panelists and the moderator. My name is Sherlock Robinson from Northeast Manchester. I have a concern here where, let's backtrack a bit, where it concerns to violence against women and children. Yes, we have heard all the protests and all the things going for the women, but what are we going to do for the men to help them to change the thought process or change the way they act towards women? Because I think if we can also help the men then that will also help to combat and to allow this thing to go away. Maybe not immediately, but try to have maybe some town halls meeting or in the schools or in the church at a football match where we can, you know, spread the message to the men. Because I think most time these men, they listen to a lot of music and they're not hearing all this that has been said on the news, either in the printed media or the electronic media. So I think we need to try and do something to help the men, to help the ladies and the children, to allow crime or, you say, abuse against children and women to be lessened.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's all about a cultural shift. And I think if we can get the youngsters, the children, understanding that there's a better way, there's a more effective way of dealing with anger than trying to exert violence on persons around who you're supposed to be looking after and protecting, then I think, you know, we can have benefits from that. First of all, children can have an influence in the home on what their parents do and think, and also it will mean going forward, as they mature, we're going to have a different attitude towards these issues. And I wouldn't limit it to children as well. I mean, there's a role for other forms of cultural re-engineering through public relations and so on, the role of the JIS to send the kind of messaging around, you know, how to deal with these issues without resorting to hurting somebody. But thank you for your point.
Good evening. My name is Owen Bartley, and I'm the owner of Unity Bogoat Farm here in Manchester. And this question is to Mr. Campbell. What are the plans going forward for the small ruminant sector? We know we love curry goat, and we're importing a lot of imported meat. We don't even know what we're getting, you know. And being in the goat business myself, and I think everyone knows that I'm one of the top in the business. So I would like to know what the plans we have going forward right now. Because you see what's happening in the goat sector right now. There's a lot of money spending. Yeah, so not even about the pre-deal losing, but I just want to know the plan of us going forward. Because we can't get no land. We can't get nothing. We have to, you know, so your plans, I would like to hear about it, sir.
Sir Bartley, it's good to see you. Good to have you here. So, yeah, champion farmer. And as you will recall, I visited your farm because I wanted some insights into small ruminants. But there are several things that we need to do. One, the physical space. So the land, as you have said, we need to be able to get the suitable lands into the hands of farmers, and we also need to be able to help them with proper goat houses as well. Because currently, most of them, they really just leave them out like that. And they become susceptible to predator larceny and other things. They could stray into other people's farms and those things, and you know, they just get rid of them because somebody is upset that they keep straying into their farm. So proper goat houses. We also need to look at how we upgrade the animal genetics as well. So, and not just for small ruminants, but in general, we've had a deterioration in the quality of the livestock in the country for a while, from cattle right down. With cattle, the lactating heifers are producing way less milk per day than they should, and that they used to, and that they do elsewhere. 7 liters per day in Jamaica versus about 15, 16, up to 18 elsewhere. So upgrading the genetics is also critical. The measures that we put in place for predator larceny is also going to be important. How we assist persons for them to get necessary security measures in place, whether it is radio frequency ID, RFID, whether it's geofencing. I saw some technology that you could actually create pastures without using physical barriers to create the boundaries to the pastures. How do we create fodder banks and all of those other things to deal with how we feed them? Because I think one of the greatest disadvantage or hindrance to persons is the cost of feed. If they are able to feed them by getting sufficient land so they could grow the necessary items to prepare the silage or whatever it is, then they will be able to be more profitable. And when you look at it, I think the last time I had a conversation with Crawford about it, who is also a goat farmer. He was saying that somebody with 10 goats could make about 600 grand per year. So if you have 100, you could make 6 million roughly. Yours is different because you deal with genetics and you sell at a much higher cost. But how do we actually make these things available to persons and so they know the different areas that they can benefit from? And also that goat meat is not the only thing, but other persons are going into goat milk, cheese, other byproducts. So we plan to support the industry in a real way by making the lands available to them so they can do the necessary housing of the animals and to actually grow the feed that they need, the material for the feed that they need, and to protect their investment with the necessary help in warding off the predial last nest.
Good night. Shaveen Brown from Northwest Manchester. My question is, give me 1 second. You hear me? Yeah. As a small business owner, I have felt so overlooked and unsupported. What real plans do you have to make it easier for people like me to grow and stay afloat?
I neglected to mention this in my presentation, but for the small business sector, we plan to implement a 3-year tax relief for new companies that are established, so they won't have to pay corporate income tax for the first 3 years. The reason we're doing that is it's important for small businesses to formalize. The reason that is important is if you remain informal, it limits your access to capital to grow. So if you're formal and you need to grow beyond partner, family, etc., you will have a better opportunity. But while recognizing that, we don't want to burden those companies with having to pay corporate income tax. We made a recommendation which the government has now adopted, which is for funding from the DBJ, which before this you would have to pay up to 10% of what you're borrowing in upfront fees. We lobbied and pressured the government to reverse that so that those fees are now incorporated into the loanable amount and you pay that back over a period of time. Because there's no point if you want to borrow $10 million, you have to find 1 million. If you can find 1 million up front, you don't really need to borrow 10 million. So we are going to implement those changes to facilitate and make it easier for businesses like yourself to access capital.
I'm Clement Pinnock from Porus. I have access to St. Tullis and Harmons. My question, it's not so much a question, just a comment. And Dr. Campbell had alluded to this earlier on. The restoration of bauxite, mined out bauxite lands in Jamaica. I would love for the next PNP administration to emphasize and to make it as a policy. You see that these mined out bauxite lands are restored early after mining is done, so that lands can be made more available to the farmers of this country. And because that is one of the problems, not having access to land. And it's, apart from such a disgraceful look, and it is dangerous as well. So these mined out holes, and they are there for years. I would love to see the next administration, which will be formed by the People's National Party, to see to it that these lands are reclaimed and made available to the farmers of Jamaica. Thank you very much.
Yes, good night, everyone. Well, I am Selvin White. I'm a utility worker who work in St. Elizabeth, but I am from Royal Flat. And my issue is with the roadway, because I have to travel all the way from Manchester to St. Elizabeth almost every day. And the road between Greenville roundabout to Spurtree is very bad. And from Lackover to Black River, whenever rain fall, is a great delay for us to get to work. So I want to know what will be done for the road network in these 2 areas.
Well, the man that just handed me the mic has to tell me how much money I have to spend first. You know, the challenge that we have is that this current administration concentrates on the Prime Minister trying to build his own legacy in building just highways and forgetting what I would refer to as the interland. Right? So the particular issue that we have now with that stretch of roadway, especially from Greenville roundabout, let us say to gutters, that should have been done in a program that was set out by then Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller, which would then have gone from Spurtree into southern Manchester. Total rehabilitation from Greenville to Spurtree and then down into southern Manchester. Once the 2016 election came, all of that program was shelved by this administration. Now, the piece from Spurtree back to Greenville should have been a part of the Spark program. But that cannot be done until the repiping is done, which is supposed to form part of the Greater Mandeville Water Supply Program, which should have started 2 years ago and has not yet. So when I hear the Prime Minister announcing that 25,000 more people in Mandeville getting water, but there's no water to get because there is no completion of the same program that he's announcing. So we have found him going around the island cutting ribbons for unfinished projects. That has been his hallmark. He did it with the Southern Coastal Highway because up to now, the piece from Harborview to Yallas has not yet been handed over to the National Works Agency, but yet still he had cut the ribbon about a year and a half ago, you know, announcing before the local government election. What I can guarantee to you is, as I said in my presentation, is that we will be looking at a road maintenance fund. I don't see this current administration fixing that section of, because already the Prime Minister is speaking about the next leg of the Highway 2000, which is supposed to go to Black River. I mean, just last week I heard that there's a shift in where it is supposed to go. It's supposed to pass from Williamsfield through Mile Gully. Then I hear it is supposed to go southern through Clarendon, South Manchester, southern St. Elizabeth to Black River. Now I'm hearing another from Spurtree down. So we're uncertain. But what we want to do is working, as I said, with the municipal corporation
in finding the best financial source to be able to maintain our roadways. Because as we are doing now, 90% of our roads need proper rehabilitation. The National Works Agency would need about $1 trillion to do such rehabilitation. Central government will not be able to find that money. So we have to find a way in how it is, as we propose, into a road maintenance fund. But at the meantime, the more than $5 billion that is spent now is too inadequate. So we'll have to find a way in how it is that we finance it. But we can't continue doing it the way we are doing it now and expect persons to be happy with the results that they're getting.
My name is Denton Atkins, a former public sector worker. So I'm at the wicket now as a private sector worker, still batting for the public sector, because I believe that they were and still is being treated quite unfairly at the negotiation table when it comes to their salaries. But yet we agree that crime and violence is a problem, but then police have a problem at the table. Then we agree that literacy is not where it ought to be, but teachers have a problem at the table. Then we under-equip the hospitals, and then we don't agree that nurses and doctors are to go up some more on the table. What different things will our Prime Minister to be and Finance Minister to be do at the negotiation table with regards to these set of workers?
I'll let Julian take it, but I just want to say one thing. We went through a major public sector compensation restructuring exercise. And we had said from the get-go that the guiding principle of equity was important to ensure that people felt justified at the end of it. And we don't think that was maintained. And so you have a large swathe of public sector workers, especially people like the teachers who are in the classrooms, who feel that they were not properly looked after. But the overall public sector wage bill has gone up dramatically as a result of that exercise. And therefore, it's going to mean that we really need to get the economy moving so that we can grow the pie and afford to make some of the adjustments that have to be made. But where we're inheriting a structure in the public sector wage bill, which has been created by this government, which is really not dealing with many of the public sector workers in a way that they feel comfortable. So we're going to have to look at creative ways that we can address those issues, especially for those professions where we need to retain people and there are many people leaving the profession and migrating and so on. So I'm talking about the teachers and the nurses, police officers and so on. And we have a strategy for retention where we're looking at things like student loan forgiveness. We're looking at things like prioritizing access to housing for them and things like setting up the staff room facilities so they're more comfortable in the workplace, the tax coming off of the tablets and so on, and the laptops, a raft of things that we have looked at to try and make their life better until we are able to readjust again and recalibrate that wage, the way in which the wage profile works, so that those who weren't properly looked after are looked after. We have a situation, as you know, where the political class got a massive increase, but the classroom teachers, many of them, were around 20% over 3 years, at a time when inflation was high. So it really has not been fair. It was not done in the way it should have been done. It created a lot of bitterness and anxiety. So we're going to have to take our time and work our way out of that. Julian, I don't know if you want.
Good night. My name is Tony Reed, and I have basically two questions, one for Dr. Campbell and one for Julian. So I will just ask them both so they can answer after I'm finished. First of all, Dr. Campbell, I heard everything you spoke about in relation to agriculture. And I just want to know, because you have some individuals who do only cash crops because of the piece of land that they are on, whether it is leased or borrowed or whatever. So they are unable to make any planning in terms of long-term crops that can probably get them more. So I don't know if you have your plan will encompass and help them. The other thing is this. We have a serious issue in relation to seeds. And I would like to know if you have any plans on establishing a seed bank that is only going to handle native seeds that can be replanted and not the ones that come from overseas that you have to keep buying, and all it does is destroy the land because you have to use a lot of chemicals to keep them looking good. That is yours. Now, Julian, this one is, we are looking, I don't know if anybody has looked at this untapped source of revenue for the country and for individuals as well. When I was in the work world, we had proposed to the then government at the time a plan to increase the national income, national insurance. At the time, I think we could have increased it by at least 100% for PAYE individuals, and it would not have impacted the salaries as much. But the situation we have now is that there are a number of people out there working who have no idea that they can pay into the national insurance. And I'm speaking of people who are just doing maybe weeding. You see them with them chainsaw or the whacker on the road. And I don't know if you have a plan to capture all of these people, because it is an untapped source that can help the government. And just to let them know that even if you pay more, at the end of the day, that means you'll be getting back more from NIs.
Well, in relation to your first question, getting land into the hands of the farmers is one of the things that I spoke to. Because most small farmers in Jamaica currently, or most farmers in Jamaica currently are considered small farmers. 80% of them are on less than 5 acres. And most of the times, it's even less than 2. So the first thing is to, as I said, do the inventory, identify the arable lands, and then make it available to them at the appropriate rate. And some mechanism put in place if somebody has the lease and they're not putting the land on a production after a certain period of time, you can take it back from that individual and give it to somebody who is serious about farming. 2, adapting to newer technologies, right? So if you only have a small piece of land that you don't want to move anywhere, maybe you have to entertain using a greenhouse or using hydroponics or something so you can increase your production and your productivity, right? Because you do have technology affords you to be able to do these things in smaller spaces and still be productive. In terms of the seed bank, it's an absolute priority. We have to use the tertiary institutions, case the university, and also the different research stations. So research and development is going to be a critical part of what we do. And I think COVID taught us that we need to be able to produce our own planting material, because in the instance where there is a problem elsewhere, we're not going to be able to feed ourselves. So to be able to develop a seed bank and develop our own planting material is an absolute priority that we're working on.
On the issue of the NIS, I think we'd have to engage in some public education to encourage persons who are self-employed, not formally in a salary type situation, and to show them what the benefit is of starting to make those contributions so that they can benefit from a pension when they get to the retirement age. So you are in fact very correct, and that's something that we would definitely take on.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Dane Thomas, pharmacist, Gateway Pharmacy, business owner. And my question is primarily about healthcare. And you know, they say that your health is the greatest wealth, right? Now, my concern is this, that we have noticed recently that there is drug shortage in the pharmacies, especially for those persons who are on drug for the elderly. That's the JADA program. And there is a major drug shortage in that regard. Additionally, I'm also looking at the National Health Fund and how the coverage of the National Health Fund is, because drugs are very expensive, and the Health Fund is providing coverage for those medications. However, is there any plans to expand the coverage of the National Health Fund in terms of the amount of money that it covers for each medication? Because we find that a lot of persons, when they come to the pharmacies, they do have difficulties. Sometimes they find difficulties in paying for their medications. And my biggest concern is that not only do patients come and buy medications, part of it, but they don't come back and get the rest. Now, if someone is not taking their medications correctly or taking the medication until it is finished, then it wouldn't make any sense to start taking the medication in the first place, because they would not be getting it better. So my question is, in terms of the Drug for the Elderly program, is there any plans to revamp that program? I know that the present government is looking at a revamping of it, whereby they're asking us, the pharmacy owners, to pay for the medications, which normally it is normally done, is normally provided by the government to us, because the JADA program is a program that whereby the pharmacies basically provide that service to those who are over 65. Now they're now asking us, based on what they're asking us to do, is to buy the medications and then give it back to the patient for $40, and then they will pay us back based on the amount of medication that we sell. Now I don't know if that is really viable, and if you guys are aware of this, and if there are any plans to change this. Also, as a lot of questions I have to ask once, I'm sorry about that. Another thing I want to ask is, or look at, are there any studies, or were there any studies done to show that the viability of free healthcare in Jamaica, and is free healthcare making our population more healthy? Is it helping in any way at all? That's a concern of mine, because even though we have free healthcare, there are so many sick persons out there that do not have access to medications. And so I'm not sure how helpful it is, and is there a need to provide more social work in our healthcare, because I think that is grossly short, and so we need to look at that some more. I have more questions, but I'll leave it right there.
The spokesperson for health is not here, but I'll substitute. I think when you're approaching these problems, you have to look at how you deal with the immediate problem, but you have to look at more medium and long-term solution as well. So the immediate problem is obviously you're trying to see how many illnesses you can get coverage for and how you can expand the coverage. But no country is going to be able to sustain that if you're not decreasing the incidence of the different illnesses. So a part of what the leader said in his presentation at the outset is that we have to look at screening, a proper national screening program, so you can detect these things earlier and you can intervene. Because what it takes to treat someone and we say pre-diabetic and to prevent them, as opposed to somebody who has diabetes and is now suffering from the different sequelae, whether it's a heart attack, a stroke, or whatever it is. So the plan has to be how we increase the screening and focus on primary level health care. How do we get back community health aides into the community? How do we get medical practitioners into the health centers in the different communities? One of the proposals is to cause those who want to specialize to have to do a year out in rural Jamaica, so that your health centers is always staffed and persons that don't have an accident or an emergency don't need to go to the hospital, but they can actually seek care within their community. So I think that's a priority of the next PNP administration. In relation to free healthcare, it is probably a Pyrrhic victory because most of the times the service is said to be free, but it's not available. If you have a fracture, you're going to have to purchase the implants. If you need a CT scan, most of the times, you're going to have to pay elsewhere and go, and most of the times not even an ambulance is available. So I think that in its current form, it's not working, because even if you wanted to keep it in its current form, you could do a simple thing as collecting the portion from the health insurance. Just put a mechanism in place so that when somebody turns up at the hospital, you could collect from the health insurance. So they still wouldn't pay, the individuals didn't pay anything more out of pocket. But you'd collect for the visit, you'd collect for the diagnostics, you'd collect for the pharmaceuticals, and you'd obviously have that money now to be able to contribute to the running of the facility. So I think it does require a study that is more meaningful as we seek to intervene so that we have a proper health care that does not prevent anybody at the point of access and that guarantees an acceptable minimum standard of care.
I just wanted to add two things. Thank God we have a National Health Fund and a JADEP program. Can you imagine if we didn't have it? And it's the People's National Party that brought those benefits to the people of Jamaica. And the other point I wish to make is that if we don't do a shift towards screening and catching these chronic conditions early so we can minimize the way in which they play out and the harm they do to patients, the National Health Fund and JADEP is going to be increasingly overburdened by the needs of patients who have chronic conditions that are well advanced. And it will be very difficult for any government to finance the care at that stage. So it's really important that we have the right mix of health policies so we can so that the resources we have can actually address the needs of the patients. And right now it's trending in the wrong direction.
Good night. My name is Adria Skeffrey, and my question is for the leader of the opposition. You stated that 30% of primary school children are graduating from primary school and they're not able to read. And you stated that absenteeism is one of the reasons for that, and you gave 2 policy options to solve the problem. But what about the students that don't have an absenteeism problem, meaning that they go to school every day and they still can't read? So what are the other policy options do you have to solve the problem of illiteracy amongst primary school children?
Thank you. It is true that absenteeism is only one of the problems that are contributing to. It is an important one, and it's one where public policy can make a big difference. But there are other situations as well. And for example, the system where we push children up from grade to grade to grade, where they're not yet at the level of being able to handle the higher grades, you're just reinforcing a permanent problem that is not being addressed. And we have to look up whether that really makes sense, or instead we put into effect remedial programs as soon as the problem is detected and make sure that they're at the level where they need to be before they move up. I am not the spokesperson for education, and Dr. Damian Crawford, I call him doctor, but Damian Crawford, Senator Crawford, is the person who normally would speak on some of the details of this. But suffice it to say that we are seeing where remedial programs can make a big difference if they're well designed and if they're put the necessary support behind them. We have one running, for example, at Holy Trinity now that has been designed by top educators. Grace Baston, who is the former principal of Campion, and before that Alpha. Ronnie Thwaites is part of it too, a former Minister of Health, Education, and another renowned educator who also worked in the United States, a Jamaican lady. And they are really looking at bringing literacy skills and numeracy skills to students that have left primary school and entered first form and are really not at that level. And essentially what they're doing is immersing those students in a much more intensive program of those type of skills. What our system now seems to assume that you can teach a broad cross-section of disciplines, and even though the children are not grasping the key fundamental ones, you can just proceed as if that's sufficient, and it isn't. So we need to actually bring those programs much earlier in the school system rather than waiting until they're now in secondary school and you're dealing with it. You need to deal with it as soon as it starts to manifest and ensure that the time is being spent on the basics when the basics ought to be learned. I can tell you that, I mean, I went to a school called Mona Prep, and when I was at that school, we spent virtually all our time doing reading, writing, and arithmetic. I mean, we spent a lot to make sure that we had those basics intact. And I believe that was a valuable system. Certainly served me well. So I do think we've kind of strayed a bit too far into other areas which are less central to making somebody ready to receive education at a different level and haven't got the basics correct. We need to go back to those basics. Thank you for your question.
Good night, everyone. My name is Richard Goscott, caretaker for the Craigie Division, and I'm also a farmer. First, a suggestion. Is it possible, I'm a small ruminant farmer also, and is it possible we could have a registry for those pre-deltives? So with AI, the minute you walk past my place, I would know that, listen, my place is being surveilled by one of those criminals. Yes, right? And I don't know if I missed it, but I'm also a beekeeper. What is in the pipeline for beekeepers? Thank you.
I pray they're last in the registry, not just a sex offenders registry. And they go into AI and then it sends off a trigger if they come near your place. Wow, sound good?
As I said, we're looking at how we can increase security to our farmers by helping them with some of the things that they need and by allowing the legislation to also assist them. And in relation to the bee farmers, that's an area that we're also doing some research on. In a presentation like this, you can't cover all the areas because it's limited time. But apiculture is obviously something that has room for growth, and it is something that will also receive an allocation and an attention so that people can, more persons can be introduced to it, and that people can be more efficient at carrying it out as well.
Final question.
Hi, good night. My name is Alexandra Lavanda, and I have a question. Just a second. My question is, what initiatives and support systems are being implemented by the government to engage and empower disengaged youths who have participated in voluntary service and to provide stability and resources for young persons interested in pursuing careers in political leadership or leadership overall?
Unattached youths. Well, our approach to dealing with Jamaica's crime monster is to have a balanced approach. And we feel this government has departed from that. And it has created a lot of problems. And we had basically 7 to 8 years of much elevated murder rate because of the poor policies of this government, where they were insisting on trying to use states of emergency, which were not designed as a way of reducing crime through holding criminals accountable by proper investigation and prosecution, but really is a mechanism to defend the state from being subverted in an emergency. And they were trying to deploy it as a kind of wide-scale curfew It did not work, and it was in fact been ruled to be unconstitutional. Before we left office, we had Unite for Change, which was a program designed to deal with young people in particular who needed some support, needed mentorship, needed training, needed to be financial literacy and readiness for work training. And that is where we think we need to go back to. And it wasn't just the government that was doing this, because we partnered with the churches and other non-governmental organizations to roll out a program, which was a holistic program for getting youth off of the pathway towards violent crime and destruction to a pathway towards productive citizenship. And we had the CSJP, which was a financing facility to back that up, which no longer exists. We need to get back to a balanced approach to law enforcement. We give the police the tools they need to do their job, the legislation they need, and the assets that they need, physical assets, and the number of police that need to be employed. But we also deal with the issues on the ground as to why our young people are heading along the wrong path and giving them a better opportunity in life. And right now, the private sector, the government has effectively outsourced this to the private sector through a program called Project STAR. But it's very limited in its scope because it's funded by the private sector. It's only in a handful of communities, whereas this really needs to be a national program. And so this is something that we are going to pursue when we form government, because we see the need to really go back in the direction of a holistic, balanced approach towards dealing with Jamaica's problem of violent crime, not just through the symptoms, but the causes as well.